I answer a lot of questions posed to atheists around here, and almost without exception, they aren't really honest questions, are they? I'm beginning to think that the religious are just not capable of asking them. But I'm willing to give anyone the benefit of the doubt and give them a shot. Once. Let's see if our latest contestant can make the grade. Because here we go again. Today, we look at a new and small channel run, I'm presuming, by Ryan Alving. He's got a question for atheists that, unfortunately, reveals that he doesn't understand how rational thought actually works. That's a common concern among the religious, though, and why discussions with the religious don't actually go anywhere, no matter how much we might wish that it would. So ask your question, Mr. Alving. We are not afraid.
Hello people on the internet. I am making this video in order to ask atheists a question.
And that's fine. We generally don't mind answering well-reasoned, intelligently phrased, and objectively minded questions. The problem comes in when that's not what we typically get asked, and forgive me for being skeptical, but I don't think for 1 second that's what we're going to get now. I've pointed out the issues with this in the past. Primarily, it's because theists, they're not making videos to ask questions of atheists because they are genuinely curious about what atheists have to say. They are doing it so that they can point and laugh and nudge other theists that, well, we've just fallen into their crudely constructed trap. Except we virtually never do that. We answer the question, and that makes the theist look ridiculous, and they have to stumble around with the goalposts, desperately trying to save face. Alright, everybody, let's have a vote. Who here thinks that Ryan is going to be doing any of that in good faith? A show of hands, please.
And the question that I want to ask is what you actually believe to be true about reality.
That's a very vague question because I can go on for a couple of hours depending on the actual answer that you want. You're going to have to be a lot more specific if you want anything serious. In general, though, I accept what can be objectively determined through the rational evaluation of demonstrable evidence. How's that?
And the reason that I want to ask this question is because I was thinking about atheism and what it actually is.
How much do you want to bet that he has no clue what it actually is? Most theists, at least theists that we take a look at around here, absolutely do not. So let's get it out of the way up front so that we can evaluate whether Ryan here has the slightest idea what he's talking about. Atheism is the rejection of claims made by the religious, specifically religious claims, for lack of any objectively verifiable corroboratory evidence. Atheists have no belief on their own when it comes to atheism. We're just saying that we don't believe you. You have not convinced us that the claims that you are making hold water. Now let's see how far off the rails Ryan is going to go.
And I think I realized that the reason why I, and so many other Christians and theists of all stripes, find so much difficulty in discussing things with atheists is that atheists are not actually presenting any claim of any kind about the universe.
No, we're not. At least you got that right. If it wasn't for theism, atheists would have no reason to speak up at all. It's like being an leprechaunist. If there's nobody out there claiming that leprechauns are real, then there's no reason to stand up and disagree. We aren't making claims. We're not the ones out there saying, well, this is true. We're just pointing out that the claims that you are making are absurd. You don't like that because it puts you in a constant defensive posture. But hey, that's just too bad. Maybe you should make better, more defensible claims, and then we wouldn't have to disagree.
And so it's not really a two-way street of a discussion, it's just a criticism of whatever theistic belief that the atheist is talking to holds.
Yep, that's exactly how this works. It would be the same thing if I disagreed with someone who believed in UFOs. I would ask them to prove their claims, and if they failed, I would disregard those claims as wholly irrational. I don't have to have any claims of my own. I am simply examining your arguments to see if they hold up to any kind of critical scrutiny. This is really sounding like someone whining, "But it's not fair." I'm sorry. Deal with it. Either be better or be prepared to get shredded.
Which, admittedly, criticism of a belief can be helpful at times. However, it generally will tend to work best if it goes in a two-way street.
It does. We can have an intelligent discussion over your beliefs, you know. Those beliefs that you put out there on your own. Nobody comes banging on your door asking to hear your views on your imaginary friend. It's always the theist that comes out into the public sphere and bothers others with their unsupported claims. If you don't like us telling you to prove it, shut up. It's not that hard. Keep your irrational ideas to yourself. Keep them out of the public sphere and out of the lives of people who just aren't interested. It's really not that difficult to figure out. Give it a shot.
Part of the reason that I think it would be helpful to know what atheists actually hold to be true on an individual level. Obviously, atheism does not actually necessitate any specific set of wider truth claims. There are spiritual atheists as well as non-spiritual ones.
Hey, he got that part right. Good job, Ryan. Give yourself a pat on the back. But here's the thing. If you have any specific questions to ask of a specific atheist, go ahead and ask them. Most of us have no problem telling you. But don't do it as a means to distract the conversation from your ideas. That also happens a lot. The theist gets upset because they're always on the defensive, so they try to go after the atheist so they don't have to continually try to rationalize their own indefensible beliefs. If that's what you're after, then sorry, it's not going to fly. We can see right through that.
But the point is, I would just like to know what you actually do believe about the real world.
Be more specific. That's a huge topic. For all that we can tell, based on the available evidence, the real world is objectively real. How's that to start? There is no evidence that any God of any kind exists, depending on how you want to define your ideas. How about that? We are not going to accept anything on faith. How about that? I mean, I can keep going if you want. I don't know what you're looking for. You're going to have to let me know when you're satisfied.
Where does it come from?
We don't know. I mean, we have some ideas, but to date, we have no firm data to demonstrate that any of those ideas are actually true. So, we're still looking. Now, whether or not that makes you comfortable, that's irrelevant. It's simply the truth as we currently know it. The only rational answer one can provide when evidence is lacking is, I don't know. It is not to just make up a God because it makes you feel good.
Why is it here?
That's an irrational question. There is no why. Why implies purpose. We might be able to answer questions about how it's here, what mechanics were in place that brought about the universe as we currently see it, but there's no reason to think that there is a why. And this is the kind of thing that we criticize because it's clearly coming from someone who has already come to a conclusion based on emotion before ever thinking about any evidence necessary to support it. And that's yet another failure on your part.
Like, what do you actually believe about, I guess, questions of ultimate truth, ultimate questions?
There's no such thing as ultimate truth. Of course, depending on what you mean by that, again, you need to be more specific. There are facts, to be sure, but those facts can be demonstrated and supported with evidence. But truth? I don't know. What do you mean by truth specifically? Theists tend to be very slippery on their definitions. You're going to have to do a whole lot better here.
And I would like to respectfully ask that any atheists who would say that they do not take any definitive positions on any ultimate questions to please politely excuse yourself from discussions of ultimate questions.
And no. We have this thing called freedom of speech and expression. Maybe you've heard of it. We can answer any damn thing we want, and there's nothing you can do about it. This is something else that we see all of the time. I don't know if this is what Ryan is actually doing here or not, but there's a lot of theists out there who will try to censor anyone who isn't giving them the answers that they want, answers that they can just turn around and use to get out of the ultimate responsibility to back up their own beliefs. So, no. Thanks for the invitation, but no. I'm not going to refrain from answering. Just deal with the disappointment.
Because absolutely anyone can say that none of the people who are actually part of that discussion are right.
But we can say that they are wrong. Demonstrating a position is false is every bit as useful as showing that another one is true. We may not currently have a solution to the COVID-19 problem, but showing that injecting arsenic into your veins isn't it, well, that helps. The very fact that you don't seem to understand that is kind of troubling, to say the least. Do you just take every bit of advice that you hear to heart without asking yourself if it stands up to any scrutiny? Because that's just a recipe for disaster.
That doesn't actually advance the discussion. It's very easy. Everyone who is trying to have this discussion is trying to deconstruct the beliefs of others. So simply having a person whose entire part in the conversation is to deconstruct the beliefs of others is not actually helpful.
And you're wrong, because we're not just trying to deconstruct the beliefs of others. We're trying to reach the truth or the facts, or however you want to phrase it. I'm not claiming that I have it. I'm just looking at the things that you are claiming to see if you have it. And whether you like it or not, you don't have it, at least not based on the evidence at hand. You may really like your ideas for emotional reasons, but that doesn't make them true. The discussion is advanced just as much by rejecting bad ideas as it is by embracing good ones.
It's actually quite similar to science. Unless you're actually presenting a theory of your own, it doesn't matter how many other theories you're debunking.
Okay, let's look at science, something that unfortunately you don't seem to understand. Because that's exactly how science works. Scientists publish their ideas in peer-reviewed journals, and the whole of the scientific community tries to rip them apart. That is exactly how science works. You don't have to have an idea of your own. The whole point is to replicate results or fail to replicate results, and thus either confirm or deny the original claims. I mean, let's go back to Fleischmann and Pahn's claims of cold fusion from 1989. They made a claim and they reported it in a journal. Immediately, other scientists set out to replicate their results. They didn't say, well, I've got a competing theory. They said, you made this claim, let's see if it holds up. And unfortunately for them, it didn't, and their ideas were ultimately rejected as unsupported. This is how science works. How could you not know that?
Because we're not actually advancing in our knowledge of the truth. If all of we are doing is just saying, that everyone is wrong.
Which is, in fact, incorrect. We are whittling down the number of possible solutions from near infinity to something that's a little more reasonable. We look at every claim to see if it meets intellectual muster. Bad ideas are bad ideas, whether we have good ones to replace them with or not. Theists simply don't like that because all they have are bad ideas. Maybe that's something you ought to work on.
It's not helpful, it's counterproductive, and yeah.
Yeah, it gets in the way of your ultimate goal, which is to just move the goalposts away from the ball as far as you can, because you know you've got no defense. Come on, we can all see what you're doing. You're not fooling anyone. This is just a desperate cry for help by someone who has no good evidence for their own ideas, so they want to shift the burden of proof to the opposition. And sorry, it's not going to work that way.
So I am just curious what you would actually put forward as positive truth claims on ultimate questions, how you came to those positions, and why you hold them to be true.
All good questions. How about you answer them yourself? Because these are the same things that I ask theists all the time, and they don't have any answers. They have claims, but they can't explain why the claims that they have are worth accepting. How do you know? How did you get that information? And how did you objectively test that information to find out if it's rationally justifiable? All of these are things that the religious simply can't handle. But here's a question for you. Now that you've had all of this pointed out to you, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to continue to make a fool of yourself on YouTube, pretending that we can't see straight through everything that you're doing? Or are you going to reasonably reconsider your stance and apply rational standards to your beliefs? Because I'm sorry, but I'm not holding my breath for the latter, and I don't think anyone else is either. Nothing you're doing here is new at all. You're just running around with straw men and a gross misunderstanding of how rational thought processes operate and expecting your audience to be dumb enough to fall for it. Now, that might work for the religious, but it isn't going to work for the rest of us. So, how about it? Going to get better, or are you going to sink into the irrational mire with the rest of your religious brethren? I'd really love to find a breath of fresh air on the religious side, but after decades of looking, it doesn't seem to be possible. Be the change you want to find, Ryan. Do better.
Boom, dicky, 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 boom.